So there's a lot of Easter eggs and comic book references in Ant-Man and the Wasp, like Egghead and so on. But which one's your favourite, and which is the one you think most people would probably miss?
Well, there are a couple of things. I'm glad you mentioned Egghead, because no one else in the junket has that Elias Starr, Ava Starr's father, is Egghead from the comics. When we first started talking about potential antagonists in Ant-Man and the Wasp, we went through the kind of rogues gallery of Ant-Man antagonists, and there aren't that many. Egghead is one of them, but then it felt like, well, we can't do Egghead, like a guy with an egg-shaped head and a lab coat. That seems like such a 1930s conceit. But we did like the idea of just doing a sort of nod to that, so thank you for acknowledging that. The second sort of Easter egg is, well, I'll give you two. Kurt, the character Kurt, David Dalsmalshin, sort of relates Ghost to this legend of Baba Yaga. And if you look carefully in Hank Pym's laboratory, he has this sort of 70s stereo console, and there's an album on it, and it's the back cover of an Emerson, Lake and Palmer record with a song called The Hut of Baba Yaga on it. Which means either Hank Pym knew about Ghost and Baba Yaga, or he's a huge prog rock fan, one of the two. One other Easter egg I will give you is if you look in the quantum realm, as Hank and Janet are leaving, and you look sort of on the sort of corner of the frame, you may see an element in the quantum realm that might suggest something that we haven't really explored in the quantum realm yet.
Ah, that's very intriguing. I was also wondering, in the first film there was a cameo from the Falcon. I was wondering, was there ever a thought of having another Marvel movie cameo in this one? Or with Infinity War so close, did you kind of want to be separate?
I think really there wasn't much thought of that. We knew that we wanted to continue the story of these characters and then introduce our own characters that were really far more relevant to the story we were telling. And I think, yeah, also the fact that we were coming right after Infinity War, which is really just like everyone, with the exception of Ant-Man and the Wasp and, of course, Hawkeye. But like the idea that this really wanted to be a little more standalone and kind of in its own world. In the first movie, it felt, to us, organic, because that sort of had the structure of a heist movie and this sort of trial by fire that we had to send Scott Lang, maybe not fully prepared, in to go to Avengers headquarters. And I think it was Adam McKay who maybe first came up with the idea of introducing Falcon in the first movie, just because as kids we loved, like, oh, I love Falcon, and that would be cool to see those two fight. But yeah, here it just didn't feel organic to the story.
I personally was really hoping during the Louise flashback when he was talking about Civil War that there'd be a little Captain America thing.
We talked about it, and in fact, early on, we had, because the whole thing is Luis's version of events, right? So we had a version where we were going to do a quick version of the tarmac fight from Civil War with some ridiculous thing where, Captain America has Ant-Man as a baseball and throws it. We came up with all these ridiculous visuals. But again, it kind of felt like, we've referenced Captain America Civil War so much, let's just do our own thing there.
Yeah. We mentioned Infinity War, but I mean, how closely did you have to work with the Infinity War team to sort of make sure this film fitted in the kind of story they were telling as well?
There's been a really cool kind of crosstalk between the writers and directors in the MCU. I mean, as far back as when I was first editing the original Ant-Man, and I had the Russo brothers and Marcus and McFeely, they came into the cutting room and I showed them some footage of Paul playing Scott Lang. I think specifically I showed them him breaking into the safe, and a couple of other scenes and the beginnings of the Ant-Man Falcon fight, just to give them an idea of the tone of our movie and how Paul was playing Scott Lang that informed them writing him into Captain America Civil War. So in this one, again, we knew the events of Infinity War and how it ended, and it was really sort of us trying to figure out what our movie's tone was going to allow, how we dealt with those, with that incredibly dramatic turn of events in keeping with the tone of our movie and where we fit into that timeline. So it was a process kind of trying to figure that out. And I think Marcus and McFeely, the writers, did the first pass of a draft of our tag scene, which then our writers came on and refined. And a lot of it was kind of figuring out who was going to be in that scene. There could have been other characters in that scene. So yeah, it was a process, and we had to be very, very smart about how we did it.
When I was just chatting to Paul, he was saying that the scene that was possibly the most difficult to film was a bit of a surprising one. It's the one where he's in the school and he's sort of half shrunk.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, what were the challenges with that?
The school scene was the most difficult in a movie filled with visual effects. That was the toughest, and when you're watching the movie, you wouldn't think it, because I think it kind of breezes by, hopefully. But it was a scene where Scott's suit is malfunctioning, and he's 2 feet tall, then 15, then 3, and he's interacting with Evangeline, who's regular sized and sometimes Wasp size. We shot in a normal, just an elementary school in Georgia. First of all, it was like 100 degrees and 100 degrees humidity in the south, and they're both in the suits. But it's the only time we had to use this motion control camera, which takes a lot of programming and higher mathematics. So it's the most we ever had to kind of like wait around. And a big part of my job as director is to shield the actors from all the technical concerns of the movie. So I think for that reason, it was really the toughest, because you were hemmed in a little bit to the motion control camera stuff.